Hello and welcome once again to the Domino Theory television program, which is brought to you here on channel 29 and 76, Cable Access TV in San Francisco, California. Today is a beautiful day in San Francisco. We're enjoying some really nice weather. Just a little windy, but basically really nice weather. Hope that you enjoyed the 4th of July. I'm sure you did. One of the things that comes to mind that we need to talk about, that we want to talk about, is the fact that we have the elections coming up, November the 5th, I believe it is, of this year, and we want to get everybody prepared for those elections, especially here in the 5th District. We hope that you will turn out, because last election was just terrible. We had a very poor showing. And we'd like to have everybody come out and exercise, of course, your right to vote. So you want to be sure and put that on your calendar as a vote date, November the 5th. One of the things that I found very amusing as of late is the fact that the municipal railway system is now allowing us to board the buses on the rear. If you're not a bus rider or a regular rider, you don't understand the whole situation. But anyway, I've been riding the buses for years, and since I was a kid, back 12, 13 years old, when I was going to Pelton out in Bayview, out in Hunters Point, there used to be a bus called the 51 Silver. I don't know if you remember that or not, but anyway, when we came from school, nobody ever had any money, so we never paid to get on the bus, which I guess was illegal, but we had to get to school, we had to get back, and that was a long ways up the hill. So anyway, make a long story short, over these years I've seen people board the buses on the rear. And this last month, the municipal railway has made a point to emphasize the fact that drivers are now being allowed to open the rear doors and allow people access to the rear because of the card readers that were installed over 2 years ago. I honestly thought the reason those card readers were installed in the first place was because it would expedite the loading and unloading of the buses, especially the loading. If you could get on the back and put your card on the card reader, well, common sense tells me that would be a logical solution. But anyway, Muni finally came up with a solution, and I'm so happy for them. We want to salute Muni for that very wise decision, especially us bus riders. We thank you very much. And now I'm sure that more of the coaches will be on time. Speaking of Muni, also, we had a fare increase that was sort of low-key. I know I paid $1 more for my bus pass as a senior disabled citizen this month. I can't really complain because I have, as I tell people constantly, lived in other places from time to time. Sounds like an oxymoron, but anyway. I have had to use other transportation systems such as the Los Angeles, San Diego, Las Vegas transit systems, and trust me, ours is a lot better. It's not what it used to be, but it's still, I think, one of the best around. So we should really be thankful for the drivers that put up with us and all of the other stuff that goes on the buses. So a salute to Muni, which I very seldom do. I am hoping that the Murakami, whatever his name is, I hope this whole thing is over pretty soon, because it's like a soap opera. It's getting to be like soap opera. It's kind of rhetoric now, and the whole courtroom scene like Perry Mason, and then the bomb threat the other day with the run Ed run thing, you know, because Ed had to run out of the courtroom. But anyway, that was his campaign slogan also. But anyway, he got out safely, and I'm glad he did. I didn't know he was in such good shape, but he is. Extraordinary, events are happening here in the city. We don't have an official sheriff, I don't think, and our sheriff is spending a lot of time in the courtroom, and it's just taken away, I think, from his duties. Wouldn't you think? So hopefully they'll get this resolved shortly, and we'll all be able to go back to jail in peace, because this guy needs his job and his family, I guess. So we'll see what happens with that. Hamilton Recreation Center, I've been volunteering over there. A lot of people talk about it, but you need to be about it. Go over and help out with some of the young people. It's not like they're retarded or anything, but they do need a little guidance from time to time. Even if they were retarded, they still need guidance. So you need to be over there helping out. Ms. Strong, who is the director at the Hamilton Recreation Center, she's doing a wonderful job. And she's very busy, a very, very busy lady, because this is summertime and day camps are open. So the swimming pool is open also, which is very nice. I don't know if you've been to Hamilton to use the swimming pool, the new addition to the swimming pool, which is a little sliding board, but it seems like a lot of fun. I don't do it myself, but I watched the younger folks do it, and it looks like they enjoy themselves. So if you get a chance, you want to go by Hamilton and participate. Also, coming up, hopefully, I have been talking about giving a Domino tournament sometime in the very near future. Now, with that said, if you are a senior citizen or a veteran interested in participating or assisting in getting a Domino tournament together, I would appreciate it if you would contact me at area code 415-292-7126, and you should leave a number there because it's one of those older phones, because I'm one of these older people that doesn't have one of those gadgets that tell you who called you. So you need to leave a number, and I'll get back to you so we can talk about Northern California's biggest Domino tournament. We're going to try to make this thing a success. We have a spot picked out, but we have to have a date. And once we get a date set, we'll be able to give you some more information about how you can enter the contest. We plan to have some cash prizes. I don't know how much that's going to be. I don't know how much we're going to charge, but like I said, it's still in the initial planning stages, but we do want very sincerely and very much to have a Domino tournament, which will include, as I said before, seniors and veterans. I think we call it something like a 40 plus. How about that? 40 plus Domino tournament. Open to the senior public. I guess you're a senior citizen after 40 years old.
A
some
white
people
conductor
are
named
seniors
Seth
after 40,
Conklin
but I guess
was
some people
killed,
are never seniors.
and Peter and his family were all returned to slavery.
Letter to Slave Master B. McKiernan from William Still. Now, sir, allow me to make an appeal to your humanity. Although we are aware of your power to hold as property those poor slaves. Your present humble correspondent is the youngest of Peter's brothers and the first one he saw in arriving in this part of the country. As regards the price fixed upon by you for the family, I must say I do not think it is possible to raise half that amount. But, sir, will the money be as great a benefit to you as the satisfaction you will find in bestowing so great a favor upon those whose entire happiness in this life depends upon your decision in the matter? Your obedient servant, William Still, August 1851.
No reply to this letter was ever received from Master McKiernan. It was an Underground Railroad fairy tale, without the part where they live happily ever after. This is the real Underground Railroad, a mammoth, dangerous struggle for freedom that failed as often as it succeeded. But the passengers and the conductors along the line were undaunted. They persevered and began to come up with ingenious escape plans. Desperate measures called for by desperate times.
Sometimes we think of the Underground Railroad as that thing where people who were free reached out to helpless, passive slaves and lifted them out of slavery. But the slaves were in no way passive in this process. And in fact, in most of the cases, you had to get to major northern centers before you would encounter that thing that we think of today as the Underground Railroad. I mean, once you got to Philadelphia, sure, then you could go to William Still's office. But what would you do in rural Virginia before you got to a place where it was even feasible for you to make a successful escape to a place like Philadelphia? And slaves were ingenious in the ways that they concocted to achieve their freedom.
The box which I had procured was 3 feet 1 inch long, 2 feet 6 inches high, and 2 feet wide. On the morning of the 29th day of March, 1848, I went into the box. Having previously bored 3 holes opposite my face for air and provided myself with a bladder of water. Thus equipped for the Battle of Liberty, my friends nailed down the lid and had me conveyed to the express office. Henry Brown, former slave.
Henry Box Brown is the archetype for ingenuity and desperation along the Underground Railroad, and ironically, one of the very few escapees known to have actually traveled by rail. Aided by Samuel Smith, a white shoemaker who nailed the crate shut and mailed it from Richmond, Virginia to Philadelphia, Henry Brown spent 26 hours traveling as human cargo. When he arrived in Philadelphia, among those present to open the box was William Still.
William says he was so bent over he could hardly walk. He said, "Praise the Lord, I'm just so glad to be free." He had traveled instead of right side up, upside down. But freedom was so important that he didn't care.
He was about as wet as if he had come up out of the Delaware, and very soon much touchingly did he begin to sing the hymn, "I waited patiently for the Lord, and he heard my prayer." William Still, 1848.
The story of Henry Box Brown's escape made good reading, and even better advertisement for the abolitionist movement. Brown joined a small group of former slaves, including Sojourner Truth, whose eloquence made them a valuable asset on the anti-slavery lecture circuit in the United States and Great Britain. Henry Box Brown's Richmond accomplice, Samuel Smith, boxed up several more shipments of human cargo before he was found out. He served 7 years in prison, but wrote that he never regretted his actions. Just before Christmas in 1848, a slave from Macon, Georgia named William Craft dressed his wife, Ellen, who was extremely light-skinned, in the top hat and well-cut suit of a plantation owner. To hide the fact that Ellen had no facial hair, they contrived a bandage for a toothache and then a sling for a broken arm to conceal her inability to write or sign documents. Ellen also pretended to be deaf so that she would not have to speak. William pretended to be his master's loyal servant who spoke for him and handled all the travel arrangements. And so disguised, the Crafts traveled by stagecoach and train all the way to Philadelphia, and then on to Boston. Unfortunately, the relative security runaway slaves were enjoying in the North was about to come to an end. The year is 1850. And the powerful cotton kings of the South are fed up with the growing number of slaves who are making it to the North. So Congress appeases them by passing the Fugitive Slave Act.
In 1850, an entirely new law is passed. It's 4 long pages. It runs hundreds of lines of text. Basically what it does is make the law a federal enforcement issue so that the owner of the slave can now go to a federal commissioner, say my runaway slave is in your area. The federal marshal is obligated to arrest and seize the fugitive slave. There is no jury trial. The alleged fugitive slave is not allowed to testify at his own hearing, and the federal marshal is authorized to deputize anybody he needs to call out the Army, the Marines, the Navy, the Coast Guard, whatever it takes to get the fugitive slave back.
Caution, colored people of Boston, one and all. You are hereby respectfully cautioned and advised to avoid conversing with the watchmen and police officers of Boston, for they are empowered to act as kidnappers and slave catchers.
The Fugitive Slave Act was supposed to appease Southern slaveholders by making it easier for them to retrieve their runaways in the North. What it did to the black community was send it into a justifiable, deep concern that indeed some of the successful runaways from decades before would be kidnapped and sent to the South, and that people who had never been enslaved, who had always been occasionally kidnapped, would now be caught up in this and taken south and sold as well.
Southern slave owners formed posses or offered exorbitant rewards to bounty hunters who began swarming north, threatening all blacks, not just fugitive slaves, with arbitrary arrest. Conductors fared little better than their passengers. Jonathan Walker, a white shipwright who attempted to ferry slaves from Florida to the free Bahamas, was ordered by a federal court to have his hand branded with the letters SS for slave stealer.
The Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 was without a doubt unconstitutional. There were many clauses in that law that were so favorable to the South that freebooters, both North and South, took advantage of it and kidnapped free Negroes and sold them into slavery. In the state of Illinois, bordering on the Ohio River, nearly all the free Negroes were kidnapped and sold into slavery by 1851. Illinois Senator Shelby M. Cullen.
Now, the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 was a needed law, for the penalty attached to that law was all the hope the slaveholders had of ever recapturing their fugitive slaves. A.P. Stewart, General of the Confederacy.
The Fugitive Slave Law in 1850 called upon non-slaves, black and white, to help in the return and the capture of fugitives. If a man is walking down the street and a fugitive runs by and slave catchers are chasing this fugitive, that man can be deputized on the spot and the person would be forced to help in the return of that fugitive under penalty of fine and imprisonment. The Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 was extremely effective in large part because it was so harsh.
And the federal commissioners, they work by fees. And under the law, if you decide that somebody is a fugitive slave, you got paid $10. If you decide they're not a fugitive slave, you get paid $5. Now, the logic of this is kind of typical congressional logic. If you decide the person isn't a slave, all you do is say he goes free. If you decide he is a slave, you have to fill out a lot of paperwork. So you did more work, you should get paid more money. But for Northerners, this is an attempt to buy justice.
The Northern United States was no longer a safe haven for escaped slaves. And so the Underground Railroad had to expand all the way into Canada, where slavery had been abolished more than 100 years before. Throughout Ontario, the Canadian government and American abolitionists funded black settlements with free housing and farmland. Canada was certainly not free from racism, but here in 1850, fugitive slaves could own businesses, expect fair treatment in court, and most importantly, they had the right to vote. By the end of the Civil War, more than 20,000 African Americans had resettled in Canada. But getting to Canada was getting tricky, and in 1850, William and Ellen Craft were caught in the crossfire of the Fugitive Slave Act. They had reached Boston and were immediately sent into hiding. They were hidden in the home of Lewis Hayden, a former fugitive slave who, with his wife, Harriet, had provided a refuge for hundreds of escaping slaves. The fugitive slave law came literally to their front door.
Slave catchers come to town. Lewis Hayden piles kegs of gunpowder on his front porch, and he stands there with a torch, and he says, "You will not take a slave from this building." And he threatens to blow everybody up, including the slave and the slave catchers and himself up, before he will allow the slave to be taken. He discourages the slave catchers. Other blacks show up, and eventually these catchers of slaves leave the city.
While the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 resulted in the unjust capture and death of countless African Americans, ironically, it also had positive effects its legislators had never intended. Many people in the North, who had cared little about slavery until then, turned against it. It re-energized and led to the expansion of Underground Railroad routes, and it inspired one woman to lay her life on the line again and again for the cause of freedom. That woman was Harriet Tubman.
Come on up, I've got a lifeline. Come on up to this train of mine. She said her name was Harriet Tubman, and she drove for the Underground Railroad.
Harriet Tubman was born a slave in Bucktown, Maryland. She was one of 11 children, and she was beaten daily because they wanted to break her spirit. She was never a submissive child. She was a spitfire, they called her. At the age of 5 and 6 years old, anything that she did wrong, they would beat her with lashes across her face, her neck, and her back. And when children are supposed to be playing, this little girl was being beaten to break her spirit.
As a teenager, Harriet tried twice to flee with her brothers, but both attempts were unsuccessful. "The next time I go," Harriet vowed, "I'm going to go alone."
She had a prize quilt, and she traded her quilt in for information about the Underground Railroad. And she struck out for freedom in the summer of 1849. She had vowed, she said, there was one of two things I have a right to, liberty or death. If I can't have one, I will have the other. No man shall take me alive. I will fight for my liberty. And when the time comes for me to go, only the Lord will let them kill me.
As so many before her had done, Harriet set out with no plan or destination, only to follow the drinking gourd, the North Star, to freedom. The route through eastern Maryland was treacherous, filled with armed patrols on horseback and bloodhounds. Placards advertising rewards for the capture of runaway slaves were posted at every tavern and crossroads. But Harriet persevered and arrived in Philadelphia.
I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person now I was free. There was such a glory over everything. I felt like I was in heaven. Harriet Tubman.
Her freedom was just not enough for her. She thought about her friends. She thought about her other relatives. And so she vowed to go back. She had the name of Moses because of her ventures of going back repeatedly into slave territory.
From 1850 to the outbreak of Civil War, Harriet Tubman returned south some 19 times to personally conduct as many as 300 fugitives, including her own mother and father and those brothers who had tried twice and failed. Again and again, Harriet went back through the eastern shore of Maryland, through the Great Dismal Swamp, across the Delaware River, and 500 miles more into St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, where the runaways would be safe. So great was her courage, so triumphant her success, that planters in Maryland offered a $40,000 reward for her capture, the highest bounty ever offered for any worker on the Underground Railroad.
And to never have been captured? She often boasted, "I've never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger." And that was true.
Tubman was assisted by Thomas Garrett, a white abolitionist from Wilmington, Delaware, who, like William Still, was a clearinghouse for information between fugitives and those still enslaved. He was in charge of fundraising and correspondence between strategic conductors along Tubman's route. And Garrett was outspoken, so he was continually threatened, jailed, and fined for his Underground Railroad activities. But to the end, he remained stalwart, even before a federal judge at Wilmington's Old Town Hall. In this courthouse, Garrett was ordered to pay $5,600 in damages to the owner of a slave he had helped to freedom. Instead of showing contrition, Garrett was defiant.
In 25 years, I have assisted over 1,400 on their way to the north, and I now consider the penalty imposed to be as a license for the remainder of my life. You may take everything I have, but if any of you know of any slave who needs my assistance, send him to me. Thomas Garrett, 1858.
When Thomas Garrett died in 1871, his coffin was put on a wagon for the steep, uphill climb from his home to the Appaquinimink Friends Meeting House. A group of black men, former runaways and free men, stood in the middle of the road and refused to let the wagon pass. Instead, they took Thomas Garrett's coffin and put it on their shoulders and walked up that steep hill. They wanted to carry their friend to his final resting place.
The Underground Railroad is, I think, important because it makes the point that some people were able to overcome the socialization of their culture. That is a socialization which provided for the notion that race was really important and whites were superior to blacks, and that it was possible for these blacks and whites to work together in this interracial movement.
And for every Thomas Garrett and Harriet Tubman, there were thousands more who we can never know. Runaway slaves and impromptu conductors alike who built their own lines along the Underground Railroad and then simply disappeared into obscurity.
The emphasis on conductors, stations, and depots, and the use of those terms has made people think of it as more programmatic than it actually was. In reality, many runaways ran away without aid from anyone, had planned their escape briefly, but it was essentially opportunistic. In the morning, it might be a better idea for you to steal a canoe and cross the river or go upriver, or that might be a bad idea that morning because people are after you and it's better to stay in the woods, although you will not make much time that way. So it's a very much seat of the pants, make it up as you go along kind of decision process.
Although there were organized chapters of abolition and vigilance societies along the eastern seaboard, to the west there was a much more grassroots kind of Underground Railroad in operation. Slaves escaping from Mississippi, Louisiana, Missouri, and Kentucky had no idea that there were well-funded organizations in the East. They just knew that if they could get north and across the Ohio River, someone would help them to freedom.
The Ohio River was a very important part of the Underground Railroad. In fact, it's estimated that over half of the slaves who escaped made their crossing at some point in that corridor.
But getting across was another matter. Nearly a mile wide in most spots, the deep, swift-flowing Ohio River is full of snags and contradictory currents.
In addition to that, of course, is the fact that in those days, most individuals, and certainly most African Americans, did not swim. So you get to the water's edge, and there is freedom. It's so close you can taste it, and yet, how are you going to get across?
With wild cries and desperate energy, slipping, stumbling, springing upwards, she saw nothing, felt nothing, till dimly, as in a dream, she saw the Ohio side. Uncle Tom's Cabin, 1852.
The story of Eliza and her harrowing flight to freedom across the Ohio River captivated and enraged tens of thousands of Americans who were reading Harriet Beecher Stowe's new novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. It was Eliza's story, many historians believe, that crystallized the anti-slavery movement in America, propelling us toward civil war.
After Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote the book, slave owners came out to say that this was fiction, but Harriet based most of her characters on things that she had seen. She says that the descriptions of Eliza she got from a minister, and apparently that did affect enough people, because a lot of people said we didn't know that this was going on until after the book was written.
The book was fiction, but Eliza Harris was not. The character was based on a real woman who had crossed the Ohio River not far from Stowe's home in Walnut Hills, Ohio. The real Eliza Harris was trying to reach a little town called Ripley. Not many people know about Ripley, Ohio today, but in the 1840s and 50s, everybody knew Ripley. It was Freedom Town, USA.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home. A band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home.
For slaves escaping along the western route of the Underground Railroad, the Jordan was the Ohio River, and the Band of Angels were the abolitionists on the other side. Most of the cities and towns along the north shore of the Ohio River had anti-slavery sympathizers, and it was through the slave grapevine that runaways came to know that a lantern in the window on the free side was a signal that a safe house was within reach. And there was one town in particular where lanterns burned brightly almost every night: Ripley, Ohio.
I think Ripley became an important stop on the Underground Railroad in part because of its location. They say location is everything, and I think that's true in this story. It was right on the Ohio River. On the opposite side of the Ohio River is Kentucky, which was a border state that had pro-slavery and anti-slavery activity going on, and we were in the right location at the right time.
Ripley was the home of Senator Alexander Campbell, Ohio's first abolitionist. He was a persuasive speaker for the cause, and by 1854, the Ripley Abolition Society had a membership of 300, nearly the entire population of the town. And according to several sources, including Harriet Beecher Stowe herself, it was Ripley that the real-life Eliza Harris was trying to reach when she plunged into the icy waters of the Ohio River with her baby in her arms.
As in a dream, she saw the Ohio side and a man helping her up the bank. Save me, do hide me," said Eliza. "The best I can do is to tell you to go far," said he. "You've earned your liberty, and ye shall have it." Uncle Tom's Cabin, 1852.
For the real-life Eliza, Thar was a rickety staircase leading up from the Ohio River to the home of Reverend John Rankin.
It was an uphill struggle to get to freedom. And of course, the Rankin House, which was one of the major first stops on the Underground Railroad, was one of the more important ones.
His house still stands atop Liberty Hill, the highest point in Ripley.
The Rankins chose this location because of its visibility, and their home was on a hill overlooking the village of Ripley and the Ohio River and the Kentucky hills, and they kept a lantern or a lamp in their window.
The name of this game is called Double Smooth. We'll begin the game by laying double blank. In order to play on double blank, you have to have a blank also. In other words, you can't play a 5 on a blank like that. It has to be as such. Now in this game, we're not going to count as we do in Big 6. We're going to count at the end of the game. And you can play this game with 2, 3, or 4 people, or you can play by yourself if you choose to. The object of the game, as always, is to win. As double blank is laid, the next player, which is the player to your immediate left, plays double 5. This, of course, is for instructional purposes only. Now, one thing you need to remember also in playing double smooth is that you're only going to play on one end. There are no plays on the other end of the spinner, which, of course, at all times is double blank. Here we play double 5. Unlike double 6 in double smooth, you cannot play on either side of a spinner. This includes the original spinner, double blank. Here we have double 5, and we'll play 5, 6. Remember, we're not going to count as we do in Big 6 on both ends. We're going to wait until the game is concluded, or this hand is concluded. The next person plays 5, 6, and the next play would be six deuce for all practical purposes. And that would be followed by a double blank, which would be, I'm sorry, double deuce, which would be followed by deuce ace. Let's see, deuce ace, and then we're looking at double ace. Keep in mind that you cannot play on these dominoes, which are doubles. The name of the game is double smooth. Here we have double ace. We'll play ace tray. Ace tray is played to the board. And we'll move these over. And that brings double tray as a play to the board. Double tray brings tray 5. Now, you always want to keep in mind in dominoes the count of the dominoes. Now, say for instance, we started here with 5 blank, and now we're back at the same scenario, 5 blank. Now, if we pull 7 dominoes for each player, that leaves dominoes to be pulled from the what we call boneyard, excessive bones. Excessive dominoes, bones, same thing. Anyway, if you have excessive dominoes to pull, then you can have continuous plays. But if you don't have a play, you have to pass. In this particular scenario, we have 4 players, so there is no boneyard, so we continue to play. And we'll play here 5 deuce, and 5 deuce will bring deuce 4. Deuce 4 in turn will bring double 4. Remember, you can only play on this end. You can't play on that end because this game is called double smooth. And I'll explain something to you at the end of this hand that might clarify it just a wee bit more. Now, the 4 brings 4 ace, and that brings ace 5, which in turn brings 5 4, which in turn brings 5 trade. Five trade will bring trade 6, which in turn brings double 6. Double 6 for all practical purposes will bring 6 blank. Now, we have blanks on either end. What does this mean? Simply that the person who has a blank has to play that blank on this end. Now, I want to make sure that you see this. As you slide these bones up, as such, this play is for blank. I'm sure you can see that for sure. Okay, now, the next play here would be, we don't have any more, oh yeah we do, we have 4. Okay, we have 4, 6, and that would be 6, 4 right here. And the next play would be ace 6 as such. And then we'll go back to ace blank. Now we have blanks on either end, a blank for the at the spinner's end and also on this end. So we want to play, let's see, let's try blank deuce, which brings deuce trade, which in turn brings trade blank. And that's the end of the game. Now, if the board had been blocked down for some reason or other, and you had a blank at either end, that means that you will get double the points in the other of your opponent's hands. However, if this does not occur and the dominoes run out or you don't have any dominoes remaining, it's a simple 1-point system per domino as usual. Now I hope that you get a visual of what we're doing here, because this is as I said, something to keep you occupied. I think the dominoes as a whole is a family game, and it's a game that can be enjoyed by all family members, and should be, because it teaches young folks how to count first of all, and secondly, it's fun. I have been really playing dominoes for quite a while, so I'm an adamant domino fan. And I hope that you are able to see what I have explained to you in this game, which is called Double Smooth. Always remember that this game starts with double blank, and you can only play on one end of the spinner, which is double blank, of course, and you can't play on doubles as in regular Big Six dominoes. Now we'll get back to you with some more instructions on other domino games. If you have any suggestions about domino games that we should know about, you can contact us at sfdominoclub@gmail.com.
Sing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieve. How precious did that grace appeared the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Twas grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me. Think about his love. Think about his goodness. that's brought us through. For as high as the heavens above, so great is the measure of our Father's love. Great is the measure of His love. Just think about His love. Think about His goodness. Oh, just think about His grace that has brought us through. For as high as the heavens above, so great is the measure of our Father's love. Great is the measure of His love. Ooh, think about His love. I just think about His goodness. Oh, think about His grace that have brought us through. For as high as the heavens above, so great is the measure of our Father's love. Great is the measure of His love. Great, great is the measure of His love. Great, great is the measure of His love. Great is the measure of our Father's love.
Okay, I hope that you enjoyed the presentation today, and we'll be back with you shortly. Hopefully, we'll have another show for you pretty soon. We had a regular schedule, but that's got kind of haywire this year because of the change in scheduling at the station also. But be sure and watch Cable Access Channel 29 and 30, Comcast Cable Access Channel 29 and 30, also on Astound. You can see us at 29 and 30, and AT&T Channel 99, I'm sorry. Our programming is just a little bit different than you see on Channel 2, 4, 5, 7, and so forth and so on. But I can guarantee you that it's something that you won't see anywhere else. So just pay attention to what happens here at Cable Access TV, and you learn quite a bit if you pay attention. As I said at the beginning of the program, we need to have you get out and vote this time. We need a large voter turnout, and we're getting you prepared for November. So it's not that very far away before the election comes up. So we'll be sure to participate this time. I'm sure you did before, but each time it becomes a little bit more important because each time we're faced with more and more we have diversions, so we have to pay attention and stay focused. I just wanted to shout out to whoever decided to build the Central Subway. You know, I'm pro subway. I love subways. As a matter of fact, that's why I just showed you the movie, The Underground Railway. But I am not understanding why there's a subway going from Caltrains to Chinatown. Now, I don't live in that area, and I'm not Chinese or I'm not ethnically prejudiced or anything, but I just don't understand that whole situation. Because it's costing like millions of dollars to build this hole in the ground that the 30 Stockton looks like it does a pretty good job of doing. And it takes a long time to get to the VA hospital at 42nd and Clement, and I can't imagine why there's not a light rail system going from downtown to the beach on the Richmond side of the Golden Gate Park. This is one of the issues that I will be running for as supervisor for District 5. Now, the other issues that I will address, and I'm not going to use this program as a platform, but I'm just going to mention a couple of things, is the youth issue. We need to do something with these young people. And I don't mean do something with them, like put them somewhere or this, but we need to teach them something. I look at the houses in San Francisco, and all these houses need solar paneling. They all need solar paneling. This is a instruction, job, just the whole abundance of jobs can be created through this one particular area. And I can't for the life of me see why we don't have a program dealing with the solar paneling industry presently. But hopefully we'll get to that and we'll see what happens. I have enjoyed being your host this short time, and I hope that you come back and see us again. Remember, the San Francisco Domino Club can be reached at sfdominoclub@gmail.com or Google+. We don't do Facebook, unfortunately, but if you do, have a good time. Thank you once again, and we hope that it's been an informative and entertaining program. We'll see you again, and may God bless all of you. Thank you for viewing.